Now, how do you cope? Let's say, how will I cope when my father dies? Before we can talk about my father's death and how to cope when he eventually passes, you need to ask some other questions initially. How is my relationship to my father? And whose death are we talking about? Are we talking about a friend? Are we talking about a sibling? Are we talking about a relative? Or are we talking about a parent? Or are you simply sitting enjoying your Subway sandwich and you turn on the news and the news says someone in Oakland got shot, someone you've never known, you've never heard, probably don't care. So how you cope with that for the most part depends on the relationship you have with the deceased. On the news, on a daily basis, you see hundreds of people either going missing or shot or whatever the case may be. They're dead. Does it impact you? The answer is no. Unless you happen to be in a particular mood. Okay? Maybe you went to the movies and saw, oh, I don't know, Good Will Hunting. Or maybe, I don't know, Scent of a Woman. Maybe The English Patient. Maybe V for Vendetta, where everybody, all those movies have in common is that they inspire certain parts of you. You become intensely emotional. And you begin to question existence, value, meaning, purpose. Where you look at a stranger's death and you say, man, you know, life is given to you without your consent. Really, you're just born, and all of a sudden it's just taken away from you. But those inspired moods don't really last very long. So, to be able to answer your question properly is the following. I can't tell you how to cope with the death of someone unless I know the relationship you have with that person. And since I made this about myself and my father, here are a couple of things you need to know. First, I have been around my father for about 60 years. I have a great relationship with my father. And I'll tell you what happened. I left Iran when I was 11. And I lived on my own till I was 14 or 15, I think. In India for some years, in America. And then your parents come. What do parents do? They're like Pharaoh, man. They put chains around your legs, around your neck, go to school, get a job, wash dishes, vacuum the house, clean the yard. That's what parents do. And then you say, man, I want my parents to go back home. They're ruining my life. But my parents did something far worse. My father one day comes home and says, we bought a car wash. Oh, that's great. So who's going to work there? You are. Well, like 1 day a week, 7 days a week, 6 in the morning till 6 at night. But what about my friends? We have a car wash. For 20 years, my father and I wash cars together. We still do. And because my father is a decent man, and because I wasn't too contaminated when he caught me, our relationship just blossomed. And because my business is thinking, I don't care about philosophy. I just care about thinking, being able to think well. Yeah? I didn't say I don't need the field to cope.
No, I'm saying like, you don't feel like you need to cope in the situation. Does it matter?
Couple of things. If you go to Egypt, when somebody dies, there is a death ritual. If you go to India, when somebody dies, there is a death ritual. If you go to the Middle East and somebody dies, there is a death ritual. If you go to Mexico and somebody dies, there is a death rituals. A ritual is a set of activities, a set of things that you do that'll help you as the person left behind to be able to cope with the passing of your father. You don't go out there and pick a fight. You don't jump from a bridge. You don't go crazy because of the presence of these rituals. What do? So let me tell you what happens, for example, if my father passes. First, they will read the Quran. That's the Bible of the Muslim world. Everybody will start crying. We don't invite strangers. Everybody who's close to your family just comes to the ceremony. And they visit you every single day for about 40 days, every single day. You never leave the son or the husband or the wife, those who have left behind. You don't leave them alone. There is another thing. There is also the presence of religion, religious ideas. God gives and God taketh. Naked we are born, naked we depart. You know, it's very, very different when, for example, let's say he's here and his mom is in India. And he hasn't talked to his mom. Maybe he talks to her once a month, maybe twice a week, or whatever the case may be. But physically he's not there. Do you know what happens when slowly there is distance, physical distance between you and a family member? It's very true. Out of sight, out of mind. When you don't see someone as often, it doesn't mean you don't care for them. It doesn't mean you don't get sad when they're dead. Your emotions are simply not as intense. Now, in some strange way, and this may sound really, really weird, Americans are really, really lucky. First, because it's a huge country. Second, because people travel. Kids at the age of like 16 or 17, maybe 18, they just pack up their stuff and they leave. They go to different states, different cities. And from what little I know, they don't really get in the car to physically go and visit their parents. They call once in a while, they text once in a while. Now, parents should consider themselves very lucky if they actually physically see their kids on a regular basis. And so they visit their parents on Christmas, on Thanksgiving. You know, add to the fact that things are expensive, traveling. And then you hear that your father is dead, your mother is dead. Yeah, well, you have physically been away from them for about 10 years. You don't know what's happening in their life. You don't really know much happening in your life. And of course, you're busy with your own life. And that means what? You will never grieve for anything or anyone you don't care for. There is no reason for you to cope. What's my name? Amir. Imagine you come here on Thursday, and my dean is here. And she says to you guys, I know that you don't know me. I am Dean so-and-so. Bad news is Amir Sabzavari died in his sleep. Now most of you should jump up and rejoice. That's a good death. Will you have any reason to cope for my death? Why? You and I don't have a relationship. The only relationship that you and I have is a business one. You want a passing grade. And you better hope that when this semester is over, I'm still alive. Because if a new instructor takes over and looks at the records and sees that there is nothing that you have done, or you have done, or you have done, they don't know you. They won't care what happens to you. Or you. Are you going to cope? Are you going to like summon up one of those grieving rituals? Of course not. Why? You don't care for me, man. You and I don't have an emotional relationship, or an intellectual one, or a spiritual one. You come to Laney College not because you want to. You have to. You need grade. You need 3 units. So the second thing you need to remember is you will only cope for the things that you're emotionally connected to. You know, if I say America is a garbage land, most of you won't say anything. If I look at him and say, Nepal is trash, he smiles. But deep down, it makes him very, very upset that I have said something to his country. Because the connection he has with his land and the philosophy that exists in his land that has contaminated him, his relationship to Nepal is very, very different than your relationship to America. His relationship to Vietnam is slowly blossoming. So remember, the more connected you are to something, when you lose it, you're going to feel. And next, the question is, once you feel, what the hell are you going to do with the feeling? Now, loss is poverty, right? Imagine I'm your brother, and you and I have a great relationship. And let's say, and we both live in Oakland. And I said, all right, buddy, I'm going to come tonight, pick you up, we're going to go see a movie. And we always have a good time. And you wait, and you wait, and you wait. I don't show up. You call my phone, it goes straight to the voice. I say, what the hell? You drive. You knock on the door, doesn't open. And you peek through the window, and I'm there sitting on my favorite sofa. Amir! You find a way to get in, and you tap me on the shoulder, and I just fall over. I'm dead. You have lost your only companion in life. Okay? This loss puts you where? In poverty. Poverty means you had something, now you don't have it. You had food at 8, time passes, it's noon now. Your stomach is screaming, I need food. Okay? What are you going to do in this poverty? The first natural reaction is you're going to cry. There is also this element of disbelief. How could they just die? It makes no sense. Every Friday we go to the movies. We've done it for the past 10 years. If you have to cope with my passing alone, it'll be devastating. Especially if you happen to have come from an environment where people drink when life becomes difficult. When people smoke when life becomes difficult. If you don't have healthy rituals in your culture, when life gets difficult, you do things that poison your body, like you legalize marijuana. There is nothing wrong with that if you know how to use it right. There is nothing wrong with drinking if you know how to use it right. But when you abuse it, things go bad. So if my loss creates this intense poverty within you, and there is no ritual you have no coping mechanism, there are no good books to read, no God to go to, no friend to go to, no things to write about, and you've always refused to take pictures of you and I hanging out, taking videos you and I hanging out, you're in real poverty, man. I have no idea how you're going to cope. If, on the other hand, after a few weeks, the intensity that lives inside you has calmed a little bit, it doesn't mean you're forgotten. It just calmed. You're tired of crying. You're just sad and you're depressed. And these are healthy depressions. These are healthy doses of sadness. You have lost something profoundly important and valuable. You ought to be sad, man. If you're not sad, there is something wrong with you. If you're not depressed, there is something wrong with you. Then you do something interesting. You go to your desktop and you say, I'm going to go through the photos. And for the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days, you just look at our pictures from when we were 10 all the way to in our 40s and 50s. And all of a sudden, that becomes your ritual, your coping mechanism. That's how you nourish the poverty. But there is also another thing that you need to understand that will help you cope. You know, one of the nice things about being the sort of rats that we are, we forget. We forget. All the things you care about in life, don't do them for a week. And then you will eventually lose interest. Now, as your brother, you may have loved me. But there comes a point where you have to live your own life, man. You have to go back to school, and then your instructor gives you math homework. What does that do? It removes your focus about me onto math, and then you have to go to work. And little by little you realize, I'm only there in the background once in a while. There is something about your physical and psychological organism. You will forget. The intensity will diminish. You won't remember as much. You won't be haunted as much. As long as you have certain rituals in your life, that when something passes, when you lose something that you really care for, if you know how to deal with that, you're rich. Now, people cope in different ways. If you were to travel back to India, say, I don't know, 300 years ago, if I was your wife and you were my husband, if you were to die, sometimes as your body is being burnt, because we cremate people, I simply go and lay on the burning wood. So I too, with you, just burn and go away. Or I may simply wear black for the rest of my life. Never marry, never smile. In some ways, I think, again, depending on your relationship, if you don't really have intense, intimate relationship with people, there are moments you say, man, I just want some intimacy, some close relationships where I can just be comfortable with people. The problem with intimacy is that when you lose them, you'll suffer greatly. Can I tell you a story? You had your hand up.
If I was going to add, or I was actually, there were a couple things. you're talking a lot about, you never said grief.
Grief?
Yeah.
Well, to cope.
I just how I feel like you said, if you're not sad, or something.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to define what you mean by sad, but I don't really grieve. I feel like people deal with grief differently. Maybe they'll hide their emotions or do other things. I'm not sure.
The 18th century is usually considered the age of reason. It's the period we call the Industrial Revolution. And it's a great thing because people believe that factories are about to take over. Instead of just making one loaf a day, now you can make 100 loaves and you can feed people. Everybody will have a job. But that's not what happened in the 18th century. Poverty grew, sickness grew, people's lives became more fragmented, more divided. And then all of a sudden, out of this particular destruction came Jonathan Swift. And he popularized this thing called satire. Satire means there's a great amount of disappointment, there's a great amount of sadness, there's a great amount of maybe even depression inside you. And the way you express it is through jokes, through things that are funny. You become a George Carlin. You become a Bill Maher. For those of you, forget Bill Maher, but for those of you who like George Carlin, go watch him. He's not funny. He talks about education, he talks about healthcare, he talks about politics, he talks about religion, he talks about minorities, he talks about all sorts of things. And there is nothing funny about anything that he says. He just reveals to the rest of us, to the audience, all the gaps, the holes, the lies, the deceptions. And the audience has no choice but to sit back and laugh. And it's a really, really sad thing. Some people express their grief by crying. Some people express their grief through what they call satire. But you will grieve. But you will only grieve about things that you have a relationship with. I was walking yesterday in the neighborhood and there was this box and it said Boss speakers. And they're expensive. Boss, B-O-S-S. And you know, I'm from a third world. I collect garbage. You know, you can't get rid of who you are. It doesn't matter how educated you are, how rich you are. So I opened the box. And you know what I saw in it? 20 iPads, 30 cell phones with all the plugs. Why would anyone get rid of all the stuff? There is privilege. You have replaced the old with the new. You have removed all the important documents from all these different technologies. And if you haven't, you have no attachment to any of them, which means you don't really care, which means it doesn't really matter who gets it, who watches it, who listens to it. You just don't care. Why? Your identity, who you are, doesn't exist in those technologies. Yeah. But imagine now if someone had lost their cell phone with all of their documents, all of their contacts. I have had students this semester who say, I can only do the coursework through my telephone, my cell phone. Things are very small, things are very difficult to work through. Can I take 4 weeks for each assignment? I mean, that's poverty, man. What do? You lose time, you lose patience, it frustrates you, makes you anxious, confused, you're fearful of your future because you may pass or not pass the class. And if you pass it, you may pass it with a low grade. And these are all things that you're grieving in a subtle way. Now, there is also this other aspect to grieving. Mahatma Gandhi is a single brown man who grieves for 400 million Indians. How is it that one man has the capacity to be sad for 400 million people he has never seen? He doesn't know who they are, what they are. He just knows that they're being enslaved by the British, that poverty is everywhere. You need to understand you have 40,000 British, 40,000, dictating the life of 400 million Indians. How is it possible that 40,000 can dominate 400 million? And how is it that a single man says, I feel the misery that lives inside every brown man in India, and I grieve the life that they are losing? Malcolm X, Martin Luther, and if you really, really want to go way up there, Jesus Christ, Socrates. There is this really, 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 really nice passage in the Gospel of Mark near the end. You'll also find it in T.S. Eliot. I think is it Coker or some work? I forget. Do not mourn for the dead. Don't be sad. Don't grieve. They've been dead for a long time. If that's a little too difficult to grasp, let me put it this way. Imagine you just come here for a grade. Half the time you're asleep, the other half you're daydreaming. Why the hell would I want to create a relationship with you? And then, every time I look at you, because of the relationship established, that relationship punishes me. I keep talking, he keeps falling asleep. I keep talking, he keeps daydreaming. I keep talking, he's playing with his phone. It's going to bother me. How do I remove this grief from myself? I look your direction. I see you're playing with your cell phone. I tell you one time. I tell you twice. I tell you thrice. And then I cut the relationship. I no longer care. I no longer care because you no longer care. And because I no longer care for you, I'm not bothered by the relationship going bad. There is nothing to cope. There is nothing to grieve over. You and I don't have a relationship with one another. And what you have in the Gospel of Mark is very, very simple. What benefit is there for a man to gain the whole world but lose his own soul? If you don't have a soul, you don't have a life. If you don't have a soul, you don't really have an identity. If you don't have a soul, you don't have meaning. You don't have passion. You don't have value. And if you don't have value, I see no need to have a relationship with you. So even when you're alive walking around, I see you as a corpse. Now that's a little too way up there, too esoteric. It's beyond, at least, the comprehension of someone like me, an ordinary, common man. Since you're out of time, let me just sum it up in this way. Since our relationship to people varies in degrees, you'll either say, oh, I'm so sorry that he's dead. Or you'll say, I'm really, really sorry, I'll come over and sit with you. Or as you hear the message, you'll sit, you'll cry, you'll call your boss and you say, I can't make it to work. Or you're just sad and depressed and alone for about 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. You read the Bible, you go to church, you're angry at life, you're angry at God. Or you become like a Gilgamesh. You realize that death is the fate of all mortals. And since you're going to die, you better make something out of your life, something valuable, meaningful. You go on a spiritual quest, or a quest to figure out who you are, what you want to do. When we come back on Thursday, we'll talk more about things that have no use. Like today. Have a nice day, people. It was only an example. I didn't mean anything by it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.